The state of the Rangers big league club is pretty darn good after winning it all in 2023. But right now, as we head into 2024, where does their farm system stack up? We're going to talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 10 seasons, including all 5 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the state of the Rangers farm system, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, where does this Rangers farm system stack up? Last year, the Rangers won it all in year one of the Chris Young, Bruce Bochy era, and it felt a little bit ahead of schedule because it just did. It really kind of snuck up on the Rangers of going from a 94 loss team to a World Series champion team. And they had quite a few young players play key roles for the big league club this year. They had guys like Leo Taveras, guys like Evan Carter coming up and making a huge impact in a short amount of time, and guys like Josh Young, who have been highly thought of for years and finally got his time to shine and definitely took to it, making the All-Star team and being a fantastic part of this Rangers World Series championship club. But they also made some big additions in the farm system, drafting 4th overall, getting an absolute star in Wyatt Langford, and a really, really big January 15th signing that is already paying some dividends and looking like a really, really great signing in Sebastian Walcott. But they also made some big trades at the deadline. They traded quite a few players, some key prospects who I think have a bright future in the big leagues, to get 2 starting pitchers who help them win the World Series. So again, job done. Does not matter if those guys turn into All-Stars, Hall of Famers, whatever. The Rangers won their first championship, and no matter what happens with those prospects that they traded away, which they could end up being bust, they can end up being great, but it does not matter. But it does matter a little when we're looking at the state of the farm and how this Rangers team is set up for years to come. Early on in the offseason, I did an episode talking about the future of this Rangers team, of what the big league club looks like for the next few years, and how basically this entire offense is locked in for at least the next 3 seasons, which is awesome and a very, very rare thing. But if the Rangers do decide to, either not extend or move on from one of those big 3 guys in Jonah Heim, Adolis Garcia, and Nathaniel Lowe, those are the only ones that aren't locked down for 5+ years, which is kind of wild of how locked in this offense, this lineup is for years and years to come. But let's look at the big picture on this Rangers farm. So I think this farm system is very, very healthy. The Rangers have had a very good farm system for many, many years. I mean, it's basically been, since I've been following the farm, or at least even since I've been following the big league club, this farm system has been very good. Texas has done a good job of developing prospects to have a highly rated farm. Now, it hasn't always translated into, stars being developed internally for the big league level. I mean, there haven't been a whole lot of those. I mean, there have been a lot of highly thought of prospects who the Rangers have either used as trade pieces while they were in their window of contention, or have just kind of fizzled out at the big league level. Not a whole lot of stars, not even a whole lot of just all-stars at all. I mean, Josh Young was the first homegrown all-star the Rangers have had since, Joey Gallo. There have not been a whole lot of homegrown all-stars on this club, but the thing that this club does have, that it hasn't had in years past, this farm system does have, that it hasn't had as much in years past, at least the last, 2 to 3 years. Basically, since 2021 was when this farm system was looking much better. In 2019 and 2020, even 2018, it was looking a little thin. I mean, the Rangers had just come out of their window of contention. They had traded a bunch of prospects away. They had graduated some prospects who they thought were going to be the next wave, like Nomar Mazara, like Rugi, like Gallo, mainly those three, because the other ones were traded off. But everybody else, it was not a great state. But in 2021, I mean, that was when this farm was looking much deeper. There were a lot of guys who I didn't necessarily think were going to be stars per se, but they had a lot of guys throughout their system, a deeper system of guys who could make an impact at the big league level as kind of an end of the bench guy, a fourth outfielder, a fifth starter, maybe a depth relief arm, whatever, what have you. But they had a lot of those guys, and that's good. It's fine. You need those guys. You need guys like that to fill out your roster, so you don't have to make a whole bunch of free agent signings for guys that are into the bench. You can just have some pre-arbitration guys not taking up a whole lot of salary and providing valuable roles. But the Rangers didn't have a lot of future stars, not a whole lot of them. That was one of the things that I really liked about when I first started following the farm system very, very in-depthly was in 2014. And the Rangers, boy, they really, really liked their stars. AJ Preller, that was the thing that I think AJ Preller was best at and still is best at, is identifying these kids that at age 16, when they're signing out of either the Dominican or Venezuela or somewhere in Latin America, and seeing the high-end potential of those guys. And man, AJ Preller found a lot of them. Guys like, Mazara, like Leody Taveras, like Jurickson Profar, guys like that. And he keeps doing it again and again with the Padres. He found another one in Ethan Salas. The guy is a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, and he has played one minor league season. He's 17 years old. But the Rangers didn't have a whole lot of stars, and until really this past year, that is something that this farm has a really solid chunk of. A lot of guys who I think have very, very high-end potential. Obviously, the top of that list is Evan Carter, and we have already seen him in the big leagues. He is still a prospect. He does still have prospect status, so he does still count on the farm because he has rookie eligibility. Now, you have rookie eligibility as a hitter as long as you have fewer than, I believe it's 150 at-bats at the major league level. Evan Carter has fewer than 150 at-bats in his major league career. Actually, fewer than 150 at-bats, even if you combine the postseason and regular season. The regular season, he just had 62 at-bats, and boy, were they some 62 special at-bats. But they also have Wyatt Langford and Sebastian Walcott, 2 guys who they added this year that were massive, massive seasons this year. And Langford is just, man, the ceiling is in several alternate universes from here. It is just that high up, and who knows if he'll get to that. I mean, you could not have a more impressive minor league debut after being drafted, after playing 100+ games and going to the College World Series, playing as much college baseball as you can in one season, then going to the minors, and then just tearing through every single level till you're already in AAA. And it's insane. This kid was just absolutely on fire. And I don't think he wanted the season to end. I think he wanted to get called up to the big leagues and make his debut in the playoffs. I'm sure he would have wanted that. That wasn't what happened, but still, the ceiling is incredibly high for him and for Sebastian Walcott, a kid who signed this year on January 15th. He was the 6th highest signing bonus from anybody signed internationally this year. And he went through 3 different levels, and he had some really, really solid numbers. An 806 OPS. The strikeouts were a bit much, but he showed a lot of power. He is a kid who plays legitimate shortstop. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's 6'4", so he's a little bit bigger for a shortstop, but I think he can definitely handle sticking at shortstop for the foreseeable future. You definitely keep him there as long as you can, and who knows, by this time next year, he might be on some top 10 prospects in all of baseball list. That's the kind of potential that this kid has. I mean, the Rangers were so impressed with him. Not only did he dominate the Dominican Summer League at his first pro opportunity, they promote him up to the Complex League, and then when that season was done, they didn't just jump him up one level to low A. They jumped him all the way up to high A as a 17-year-old. that is a huge, huge sign of their confidence in him, in what he can do, and how high his ceiling is. I mean, he has got star potential written all over him. Some loud tools, a lot of risk for sure, because he is still 17 and has played like 2 games above the complex league. Not 2. It was like, I think, 10 or so in Hickory. But still, very, very impressive from that young kid, and it really shows how excited they are about him. Coming up, we're going to talk about some key losses from the farm system, why those don't hurt as much, and why it's so important to have a good farm system, even as a team competing for a championship right now. But first, this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. If you want to get in on some of this college bowl season action, I'm going to be out of town next week at the Rose Bowl. If you wanted to bet on the Alabama Crimson Tide, or if you wanted to bet on their opponent, Michigan, you can go check out those odds. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. We'll be back either on Thursday or Friday, like I just alluded to in that FanDuel ad read. I am out of town currently as you are listening to this. I'll be back on Wednesday afternoon. I am at the Rose Bowl, a very generous birthday gift from my brother for us to go see Alabama play football. So I'm recording this on Friday, the week before. So hopefully there's been no news that breaks while I'm out of town. Otherwise, it's going to have to wait to get a podcast until either Wednesday night or Thursday morning. Now, let's look at some key losses from the farm system this year. There's really a big 4. One of them you might not think of as a loss, but it is a loss from the farm because that prospect has graduated. That loss is, of course, Josh Young. Josh Young was my top prospect last year. I feel very good, very smart about putting him as my top prospect. Now, Evan Carter made me look a little silly, having a 1,000+ OPS in his 21 games or so in the regular season and batting third for the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I could not have predicted that. I mean, I could have at the start of last year when I did my prospect rankings, or even, well, actually, I couldn't have ranked him. I couldn't have ranked Josh Smith or Josh Young over him at the midseason rankings. But the preseason, if I had predicted that Evan Carter would make his big league debut, early on in September, hit over 300, have an on base over 400, slug over 600, and then be batting third for the World Series champion Texas Rangers, you would have slapped me in the mouth and called me a liar and a fool and a moron. And you would have been right to at the time. But Josh Young was, I felt very good about ranking him above Evan Carter at the time, but he is no longer on prospect list. He is no longer on the farm, but that is okay because he is crushing it at the big league level as the Rangers' everyday third baseman on the reigning World Series champion Texas Rangers. Yes, I'm going to say that probably about 100 times each episode because I'm still convincing myself that it's real. They also lost Tekoa Roby and Thomas Jase in the trade for Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton. They also lost John King, but that's not really a huge loss for me. I think Tekoa Roby, there was an argument to be made when the Rangers traded him that he was the Rangers' top pitching prospect at the time. He continued to crush it with St. Louis in their farm system whenever he was traded, and I wish nothing but the best for that kid. I'm very, very high on him. It would have been nice to keep him around. But hey, if that's the cost of doing business, that's the cost of getting a Jordan Montgomery and a Chris Stratton and a World Series, worth it. Again, very worth it. Now, Thomas Sajasi, that one's going to really hurt. I mean, Sajasi continued to hit at every single level he was at. He continued to crush it. He was the Texas League Player of the Year because the Cardinals' AA affiliate is the Cardinals in the Texas League. So he continued to stay with the Cardinals and in AA in that Texas League and continue to crush it with them. I think he's got a very bright future, and that one's going to hurt. I think of the prospects dealt, well, if Roby turns out to be a good pitcher, every pitching prospect the Rangers trade away that becomes a good pitcher that is not a homegrown developed starting pitcher is going to hurt a lot. Like the Cole Reagans one is going to hurt forever, and that's just fine because that's what it costs. But Luis Angel Acuna, I really liked him. I thought that he had some very great tools, and I think he's going to be a pretty solid major league player. But again, none of these guys are guys who I'm losing sleep over the Rangers trading away because they won a World Series. And that's kind of what I want to get to a little bit later on I guess we'll go ahead and talk about it now of why you even have a good farm system. The whole point of the farm system is to acquire talent, to win ball games at the big league level. Whether that is developing your own stars internally, like a Josh Young, like an Evan Carter, or like a Leo Taveras, or whether it's for trading for Jordan Montgomery or Max Scherzer, or even in Aroldis Chapman. That is why you want to have a deep farm system. That is why drafting and developing players in baseball is not like other sports, and especially the draft at the top end, really at every single stage of the draft. You are never, ever should you be drafting for a need. Ever. Even if you've got the first overall pick and there's two guys and both of them are pretty good, but you're leaning towards, oh well, we need some more help on our pitching staff. We're going to go with the pitcher as opposed to the hitter. That is never a way any team should be drafting, and it should be a fireable offense if a team does that. It might be something that plays into consideration, but at the very, very lower levels, it is not something that should be anywhere in your top 5 factors as to why you're drafting a player. It is all about talent. Just acquire the most talent that you can. Don't worry as much about the timeline of when is this prospect going to be ready? What is our big league club going to look like? Oh, well, we have, this guy locked in, Corey Seager locked in for 10 years, so we can't draft any shortstops, or we can't internationally sign any shortstops, or if we're trading away a big league player for some prospect, we can't acquire any shortstop prospects. That's not the case. That is not the case at all. And it is something that I think that the Tigers were thinking about when they drafted not Wyatt Langford with the 3rd overall pick. They drafted Max Clark, who might be fine, but Wyatt Langford was clearly the more talented player, and they decided to go some different direction. I will thank them for the rest of time because Wyatt Langford seems to be on track to be an absolute stud. But literally the whole point of a farm system is to develop talent, to get major league wins. That is the point of the whole darn thing. And when you get too lost in the weeds of, oh, well, we got to hold on to this prospect because in 2027, this guy is going to be, our 3rd starter in rotation, or this guy is going to, fill in for Jonah Heim if he goes to free agency, or this guy is going to fill in right field if Adolis Garcia, goes in free agency and the Rangers don't extend him, which if that happens, I'm going to be very, very angry. But the Rangers do have a lot of talent for the future if that happens. And that's why you have a farm. That is the whole entire point. It is so easy to get lost in the weeds of, prospect rankings this, prospect rankings that. But you always got to keep the bigger picture in mind when you're talking about, when you're analyzing, trades that the Rangers made, or guys that they signed, or guys that they drafted. That is always the bigger picture, and it is always focus number one for the GMs, for the front offices, and it should be for the fans as well. Coming up, we'll look at guys at each level of the farm that had a breakout this year that are definitely worth mentioning, that I did not think about too much before the season, but definitely made me think about them a lot towards the end of the season. Right after this word from our sponsors. Now, before we get into guys at each level that really stood out to me in the Rangers minor league system, let's look at some guys who took some steps back, because while it was a good year on the farm, there were a lot of young stars breaking out, like Langford, like Walcott, like a couple other guys I don't get into in just a second. There were also some steps back, and unfortunately, for the most part, most of those steps back came from pitchers, or just unfortunate things that happened to Rangers prospects. I mean, I think for me, the biggest frustration I have from this season, the thing that irked me the most, maybe the most sad, not angry because it's not really anyone's fault outside of, whoever designed the human body to not be able to throw baseballs 95 plus miles an hour 100 times every 5 days and have their elbows blow out. Whoever designed humans like that, I wish they would have had a little bit more reinforcement for elbows so that didn't happen, because Tommy John surgery for Kumar Rocker in May was the biggest bummer of the minor league season for me. I am still a huge believer in Kumar Rocker. Now, did I like the pick at the time? Absolutely not. I was very, very unhappy about the Rangers deciding to draft Kumar Rocker at that time, but by saving all that money and drafting Brock Porter, I see, okay, they're trying to get 2 bites at the apple, because the Rangers aren't going to have a whole lot of top picks if they are winning at the level they think they will be in 2023 and beyond. And turns out I was right. The Rangers will be drafting 30th in next year's draft, and that's pretty darn good. But the last top 5 pick that they will have, hopefully for some time, being Wyatt Langford, means, okay, they saw the signs in that 2022 draft of saying, okay, let's get a couple bites at the apple. And I'm still a big believer in Kumar Rocker, because his ceiling, I'm still a huge believer that he could be maybe even a top end starter. If he becomes, a number 3 starter in the Rangers rotation in 2025, then that's a huge win. That's a huge win, even for a number 3, I believe it was, overall pick that was not very highly thought of at the time. The other big steps back that were really frustrating were obviously Owen White's stuff regressing. I mean, just not having the same zip on his fastball, the same break on some of his breaking stuff. The command was still... Is he a little spotty as well? I mean, he walked a whole lot more guys in AAA than he's been accustomed to walking, and it's because he had to nibble a little bit more because his stuff was not quite there. So he was a guy who, I mean, with Jack Leiter not progressing as much as I would have liked, he did still make some steps forward, and I am still on the Jack Leiter bandwagon. It's a little smaller than it was a couple years ago, but hey, I'm still a believer. But Owen White was a guy who I thought was going to be ready to break into this Rangers rotation at some point this year, just at least as a 6 starter kind of option. And that really wasn't the case. That was Cody Bradford, who, shout out to Cody Bradford for having a great season and for putting himself on this radar and being a guy who is probably going to start the season at this point in the Rangers rotation. If not, then he's going to be the Rangers' long reliever. But that is not something that I thought was going to happen for Cody Bradford as of last year. So that is a developmental win for the Rangers. But one last bummer from this season before we move on to the bright spots is Cole Winn still being an absolute mess. I don't know what is wrong with Cole Winn. I wish I knew what is wrong with Cole Winn. I wish I could wish it away and fix him. But, I mean, he had an ERA north of 7 in over 100 innings in AAA this year. He had 7 walks per 9 innings. 7. That is too many. That is not a guy who you can even throw as a long relief. Like, that is just nothing. It is perplexing because just 2 years ago, Cole Winn was such a bright spot in this Rangers organization, and just out of nowhere, just poof, the stuff is gone. He does not know how to throw strikes anymore, and everything just seems completely different because there is no such thing as a pitching prospect. Pitching prospects are always volatile. Always. Even Paul Skeens, a guy who was thought of as the greatest pitching prospect out of the draft since, Steven Strasburg, basically? And even Steven Strasburg, I mean, we saw how all that turned out. I mean, it is so difficult to develop starting pitching or any pitching in general, and the Rangers just keep catching bad break after bad break after bad break. But hopefully in 2024, as they are reigning champs, maybe some of the good luck will start sprinkling on them. I mean, they got good luck in Wyatt Langford falling to them. They got good luck in out-scouting everybody for Evan Carter back in the 2020 draft, and they also got good luck in all of their big 3 relievers suddenly turning it on at the exact same time in October and winning a championship. That was some pretty good luck. But there was some bad luck along the way. Now, enough of the bad luck and the bad stuff, because this was an overall very good year on the Rangers farm, and there were a lot of guys who broke out that I did not think much of before the season that really put themselves on the radar in 2023. We're going to do someone from every single level. Starting at the Dominican Summer League, we have Yeremy Cabrera, a 17-year-old center fielder slash right fielder who had a really, really nice breakout season. He had an OPS north of 1,000, had the 3.45 slash line, and more walks than strikeouts, which is very, very impressive for a 17-year-old at the Dominican Summer League level. Also hit for a decent amount of power, had 6 triples and 7 home runs, and stole 9 bases as well. That is very, very exciting for a guy who played a little bit more right field than center field, and we'll see where he starts next year. I would assume it would probably be at down east, but encouraging stuff for the young kid, Yeremy. Now, let's look at the Arizona Complex League. There is obviously the very obvious pick in going with Sebastian Walcott, but I kind of knew about Sebastian Walcott. When your team spends about $3 million on an international signing, that kind of puts a guy on the radar. And it's not to say that Sebastian Walcott didn't have a great season, but I think Echeverry Vargas, Ekedri, I am butchering that first name pronunciation, but Mr. Vargas, we will call him, a middle infield prospect from the Dominican, signed in 2022 for just $10,000. Had a pretty solid debut for the Dominican Summer League in 2022. This year played in the Arizona Complex League and hit 11 home runs in just 52 games, had an OPS just over 950, and then played just one game in down east. I think that's where he will start next year. Played a little bit more shortstop than second base. Also played a little bit of third base this year. Actually, this year he played mostly shortstop. I was looking at last year's stats in Dominican. Played 17 games at shortstop, 27 at second base. But that was mostly because he was at the same level as Bam Bam Sebastian Walcott, who they want to see at shortstop a little bit more than Mr. Vargas. But hey, I am a big believer in this kid. He had a really, really good season, really put himself on the map, showing that power. The strikeout rate was a little worrying with 55 strikeouts in 224 plate appearances. But hey, 21 walks, and that'll play. That's a decent walk rate, and I'm excited to see where he starts next year. I would assume it would be at down east, and I think it might even depend a little bit on where Sebastian Walcott is, but I'm excited to see this kid. He's got a bright future, and he really put himself on the map this year. Now, let's move on to the full season ball of down east. This was the breakout star of the Rangers minor league system. Yes, there was Wyatt Langford, and that was all well and good and amazing and awesome, but this guy is someone who I don't think I had even heard of before this year. This is Abimelec Ortiz, the first baseman slash right fielder slash left slash mainly DH first baseman out of Puerto Rico. He was he went to high school in Carlos Beltran Academy. He was one of the 2020 post-draft undrafted free agents. That's the word that I am looking for. And this year, boy, did this guy put on a power display for just a very, very impressive power display. He mostly played his ball at Hickory, but down east is where he put himself on the map because he played 29 games there. He ended the season playing 109 games between down east and Hickory, and he had 33 home runs to go with 4 triples and 20 doubles. That's pretty darn impressive. That's pretty darn impressive. 49 walks, nearly a little bit over a 10% walk rate, which is very, very exciting. The strikeouts were a bit much. He also did play in the Arizona Fall League for the Surprise Segueros in 12 games there. Added 3 more home runs just for good measure. Also had 12 walks, 8 strikeouts, which was very, very exciting. This kid's going to mash. He can play first base. Maybe he could play left field, but it is really all about the bat, and the Rangers haven't had a first base prospect with this much promise offensively since Ronald Guzman, which again doesn't trigger super great memories. But hey, this guy's going to go as far as his bat can carry him. I wouldn't be surprised if he started next year in AA. He could end up making his way to AAA next year. He's 21 years old, and the ceiling is as high as his bat can take him, as a pretty darn good hitter that I don't know if he's going to find his way into the Rangers lineup in the next couple of years, but he's definitely a prospect to keep an eye on, because anybody who can hit like that with that amount of power is very, very exciting to watch. And I was very excited to see him have this breakout this year. Another guy who I was very excited to see their breakout was Cam Cauley, a former guest on the show. I believe it was mid-season this year. Had a really, really nice season between low A and high A. Really had a great start to his high A career. Finished the year with a 744 OPS. Decent on base. Pretty good stolen base rate. 36 stolen bases. It's just 5 times caught stealing. Also had double-digit home runs. As a 20-year-old, a little bit more power than I thought he would provide, but he can really pick it at shortstop, and the bat has got a higher ceiling than I thought at the beginning of the year. He is a real gym rat, scrappy kid, all of the whatever adjectives you would use to describe someone with the, let's say, Ian Kinsler, Dustin Pedroia starter kit, but real believer in this kid, and I really like what I saw from him. At Double-A, we have Trevor Halver, who I believe, if I remember correctly, yes, was a part of the Joey Gallo trade, the fourth prospect basically in that trade. He had a really nice season for Frisco. He's always had very good on base skills, had a crazy walk rate of 71 walks in 471 plate appearances. That is an 18, I believe, percent walk rate. Also added some decent power, had an 803 OPS, but got the batting average way up from where it had been in years past. He had been a low batting average, middling on base guy, but making that batting average a little bit higher with the insane walk rate and adding a little bit of power. It was a solid season for the young corner outfielder slash first baseman. Again, another guy who's going to go about as far as his bat can take him. And lastly, at the AAA level, we have JP Martinez, who had a very, very solid season, even got his big league debut, had a 961 OPS in AAA this year in 77 games, and good on him. He made good of his major league debut. He contributed in a big way to some Rangers wins at a key time where they needed every single win that they can get. And shout out to JP Martinez for having a very, very good year. Very proud of him for having that breakout year and getting rewarded by helping the big league club win some games. That's the state of this Rangers farm system. It is in a good place. The Rangers big league club is in a very, very good place. And everything is looking bright for your fighting World Series champion Texas Rangers. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.